All right. So today we are going to go over community engagement results and the strategy prioritization. We had 188 strategies altogether, and we need to start whittling that away and figuring out what we can actually accomplish, what we want to focus on. So Wendy, did you want to introduce the agenda and objectives? Okay,
sure.
Great.
I can do that. Okay, so for our agenda, we'll start off as usual with our settling in and ground rules. Then we're going to go over the community engagement results that we've been gathering over the last several weeks since we last met. A VCU equity assessment that was done on our process to date. And some prioritization will be our actual exercise that we'll be working on today during this meeting, and what's going to get us to our 2030 goal, which is kind of our intermediary goal. And then we'll do wrap up and next steps. So the objectives for today are to understand the community feedback of our draft strategies and take a look at how this informs what our next steps will be. And then we're going to hopefully agree on a prioritization scheme for those strategies and see which of those kind of rise to the top, because overall we've got like 188. We can't do them all, but we need to see which ones will be key to getting us to our 2030 goals. Yeah, so we'll take a look at that and how should we decide which ones move forward. There you go. And ground rules and expectations, these are the ones that we've shared with every meeting. So again, you should be familiar with those. Unless anybody has any new ones, we will just stick with those for today.
All right, so where we are in our process. As you can see, we're moving right along. We are in the middle of the plan development. We made it through the capacity building and developing and refining strategies. We're finishing that up today. And then next will be actually creating the implementation framework and metrics. So it's nice to see that we are making progress. And just to remind you all where we are in the plan itself, we've developed the goals and the vision, the community priorities, the pathways, the objectives. We're finishing up the strategies now, and then implementation plans is what we'll be digging into in the next 3 meetings. You know, how are we going to implement? How are we going to measure the progress? And how are we going to ensure accountability and ownership in this plan? So this is what the meetings are going to look like over the summer. Today we're going over the community engagement and feedback, and then we're going to talk about this prioritization. And so be thinking about, you know, what values do we want reflected in our plan through the selection of the objectives and strategies, and what strategies will most help us achieve our 2030 goals. Then at the next meeting on June 17th, we'll talk about our shared understanding of what's achievable and what success looks like for each strategy, how we'll measure the success of these strategies. And then after that, in July and August, we'll talk about equitable implementation of the plan and how will we ensure accountability and transparency in that implementation. So that's what's coming up next. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into the community engagement results. We had a very exciting community engagement period and share the work that's been developed in the working groups through several avenues. We had almost 500 individuals, 500 Richmonders respond directly to our work. I'm sure many more than that actually saw it. We had lots of PR. We had several different tools that were out there to engage with folks. And then all of those responses are now being integrated into the work we're going to be doing today and in the coming months. I think someone doesn't have mute on. If you could just double check, there's a little bit of feedback. All right, so Wendy, do you want to talk about the demographics of our engagement?
Sure. So while we had our survey out to the public for comment and public engagement, we did what we think is probably the first time in the city for during an engagement process to try actually mapping where the responses were coming from. So all of the surveys were geocoded so that when we got a response to it, we could see what census tract it was coming from. And so each week, as we saw where the results were coming in, if we weren't getting information from some of the areas that we wanted to, we would try to kind of push out some action in those areas to see if we could get more people to respond to the survey. So like Dawn said, overall, we had 495 survey responses. 74 of those were paper responses. 199 of them were the 10-minute survey. 192 of them were the 30-minute survey, and then 30 of them were the Conveyo kind of document that people could use on that. So yeah, so I don't know if anyone has any questions. We did not do, I don't think, any more demographic matching or mapping except for location. So we didn't do, I don't believe we did like race or anything like that, but we did get where they were coming from. So again, the darker colors are more responses and the lighter colors are fewer responses on this. So
yeah, so you can see the,
yeah. Oh, sorry.
yeah, Torrance, go ahead.
Hi, Wendy. Yeah, I was, so I forgot, the survey was conducted with all, how many paper requests, survey requests did we give out? Or was it a combination of paper and computerized responses, or how did that?
See, I'm not sure how many paper were given out.
We had 74 paper responses, and the roundtable, if anyone is on from the roundtable, please speak up and help clarify. But they were the ones who really went out and helped distribute the paper survey in the neighborhoods that we were really trying to get feedback from. So as she said, 74 paper surveys came back. And then the rest of it was all online.
Okay.
But you can see the neighborhoods that, that were most responsive. And it was really interesting week to week to look at this mapping, and then that tailored the engagement. So then we could go back out. At first there was a lot, I think, kind of in the West End, and then we realized we need more distribution. So we targeted through different of our community groups to get into some of those other neighborhoods. So it was really interesting to watch. And I know that there was some nice feedback about the community appreciating this approach. Did anyone else have a question about that? Katrina?
Yeah, so in the no response areas, do you have any idea, any guesses about why there wasn't as much engagement in those areas? And are there going to be any efforts to reach out again, or will there be an opportunity for people to respond or give ideas or feedback in the future? Or is this kind of all we're going to be working with?
No, this is really great information. So of course we're using it to tailor the work during the April engagement period, but we're going to have another engagement period in the fall. And we even have an intern who's going to be helping us think more strategically about how to make this engagement even more equitable the next time. So yeah, it's an ongoing learning journey for all of us. Great question. Anyone else?
I think just looking at the map, like some of those districts that border along the James River running to the south, that big white area, a lot of that's industrial, so there might not be as much residential there. But there are certainly a lot of areas that we did not get any responses from that we need to work on getting responses from next time.
All right, so in terms of the survey feedback, we offered a 30-minute survey, and it had a question that said, which of these are most important to help achieve your vision for a climate neutral and climate resilient Richmond by 2030? And this is where we really wanted to see what are, of these strategies, which ones really speak to Richmonders. And so the strategies that all the pathways developed were kind of rolled up into strategy buckets. And there were 51 total. And you can see here how they ranked the top 13. These are the ones that the community really supported, thought were most helpful to achieving their vision. And we use that to help rank our priorities as one of the criteria. You can see here that 2 of the ones in the waste pathway that are important to Richmonders are composting and environmental justice. So that's good feedback to know. So here are all of our waste strategy buckets and where they landed. Again, composting and environmental justice at the top. Pay as you throw didn't quite get as much community support, but you can just take a look here for yourself and see how our strategies ranked. So just to remind you, what the Conveyo document that Wendy was talking about looked like. This was where we put all of our strategies on an interactive PDF. And want to thank all of you who accessed it, shared it through the newsletter, directed your organizations and stakeholders and friends and family to it. We did get over about 200 responses or comments on this document, so that was really helpful. And so as you can see in waste, this is just a snippet of 4 of the strategies, but zero waste related to municipal government and consumption were rolled up into this municipal operations strategy bucket. And then over here, we looked at these 3 components. So the greenhouse gas reductions impact was score. We used our methodologies to map this out through all of the consulting work we've been doing on the back end. And we found that that initiative would have a medium impact on reducing carbon emissions. And then we looked at resilience, and it didn't really score very high, and zero waste isn't necessarily going to help with urban heat islands or severe storms or helping the community be more resilient to climate change or flooding. So it didn't get any shaded in on this one, but it does help with these 2. So healthy and clean and safe neighborhoods, and I believe this one's government accountability. So that's what the shading means. And so that was just to help anyone who viewed this document to kind of see the impacts of these strategies, looking at those different components. So on the 200 comments that we got from the Conveyo document, staff read them all and responded to them on a shared document that's accessible through the website. So anyone who took their time to comment on our strategies, we have a response or an action step on the right. So nothing was ignored. It's either going to be, considered in the next steps, or we just thanked them, or in some cases, maybe they made a comment or made a recommendation that is somewhere else in the plan. So we just oriented them to that. And then we have an internal process for dealing with all of those comments. So, we're trying to be as transparent as possible. So we have the outward facing comments, responses on the website and newsletter. And then internally, we have this tool that David Sale did a great job putting together for us. So each strategy, as he read through the comments, he noticed that they were either falling into some kind of a milestone or indicator or implementation category, or maybe they had some financing suggestions, or maybe there was some community support. This one on composting, they say great resource for urban gardening initiatives. Okay, great. That's good to know that someone supports that. So we wanted to capture that. Sometimes they recommended a new strategy, or they made a comment. This one, investigates citywide composting programs similar to the recycling program to further reduce household waste. Well, that is already included. So we just made a note that that comment is already included. And then maybe there's some language for potentially revising the strategy. So here, consider language for a city-run composting program similar to CVWMA. Just an idea to consider. And then if you click on the link, it would take you to that strategy where you might want to work on it. So this is just a tool that we're using just to let you know that all of that information, we as staff are feeding into the work that you guys are doing to help organize it so that we can just make all of these strategies stronger going forward. Okay, so next, I'm going to hand it over to David to introduce the VCU equity assessment.
Thanks, Dawn. Yeah, so in another effort to be transparent and accountable and engage sort of in continuous learning as this process unfolds, the city worked with a class of graduate students at VCU in the urban planning department to assess sort of how the equity process has sort of unfolded to date and whether the city was meeting its goals to center equity in both the process and the outcome. And so the class interviewed city staff, the facilitators of the roundtable, as well as members of the roundtable to get their sense of both what the goals were coming into this process revolving or centered on equity and sort of what their experiences with equity have been so far. And then they compared that to best practices from other cities who have done a really good job of incorporating equity into their climate action planning or other research on best practices and community engagement to develop strategies to make sure that moving forward, the process continues to be as equitable as possible and that the implementation of this plan centers equity and community involvement as much as possible. And so most of the recommendations tended to face actions that the city could do or that the roundtable could support with, but a few did specifically address the working groups, and so these are just some of them. But looking at ways to diversify working groups even further to better represent the diversity of Richmond, thinking about when we're talking about implementation plans, what equity-related indicators we can infuse into the plan to complement, climate resilience indicators as well. So things like that, more so forward-looking. But the full report I know is available to anyone who's interested, and I know city staff are happy to talk about any questions or the report that you may have.
Great, thank you for that, David. Yeah, we're on a learning journey together. We're all trying to, it's a very iterative process. We're just learning as we go, and we are really appreciative of these grad students taking a deeper dive and, sharing some feedback from their interviews with the roundtable and making recommendations on what we could do better based on best practices and lessons learned. Does anyone have any questions about that or any of the engagement before I move on to the next part of the presentation? Okay, great. So prioritizing the strategies. As I said, we had 188 strategies altogether, and we really need to think about setting ourselves up for success. So our short-term goal by 2030 is to realize a 45% reduction in carbon emissions. And then, of course, we have the 2050 goal of a carbon neutral, resilient, and equitable Richmond. So we need to really think about how we can successfully meet these goals given the timelines, available resources, and our capacity. We want to be successful, we want to achieve those objectives, and we really need to think about our timeline. And just so you know, anything that's not prioritized in this activity, it won't be lost. You guys came up with fantastic ideas. A lot of them can be combined or rolled up. And then if there are some that are maybe not as impactful, they could be part of a checklist that would be, we could update. And then when we revisit this plan, I think every 5 years is the goal, we could maybe incorporate some of the strategies back. They might just not be something that's as impactful today, but in 10 years, it'd be really important. So nothing's going to be lost. Okay, so what we did is we took all of those high, medium, and low ratings from the work that was done to create the Conveo document, and we gave them 1s, 3s, and 5s. So, for example, a potential greenhouse gas reduction impact, if it was high, it was a 5, medium was a 3, low was a 1. And then same with all of the each of the resilience impacts and all 7 of the community priorities on the equity side. And just to remind you, the Greenleaf consultants have been very involved in all of this methodology all along. And so Greenleaf consultants, along with city staff, looked at each strategy. So there's quantitative numbers as much as possible to back these assessments up. And then they were also able to look at we all looked at other cities, how they did this and rated these kinds of strategies, and then of course other best practices out there. So once we came up with the criteria and the high, mediums, and lows, we realized that there are some other criteria that were important to measure in terms of feasibility. Are there barriers and financial and political capital that would be required to implement these strategies? So what's the feasibility of it? How about the cost effectiveness? We want to make sure that the cost of implementation versus the rate of return is helpful. And then the community support was the priority rankings from that 30-minute survey that we went over. And then economic development is the number of jobs created and sustained by each of these strategies. And then on the equity side, again, these are all the community priorities. So we had those numbers, and then we decided, we realized, are they all equally weighted, or are some potentially, should they have more of an impact on the total scoring than others? So we took this to the roundtable to review the weights associated with each criteria and asked them to provide feedback, and they did. And so what we ended up with, this scoring on the right, that allows us to reflect our equity-centered values appropriately. So this is what the matrix looks like, and it's just a snippet of this massive spreadsheet. All 188 strategies received a scoring on every criteria and a weight. And so each strategy has its own impact score and its own equity score. And so then this next column with the percentages, that's where we ranked each of these, where it fell in the percentile against each other. So once we got all those scores, we thought, okay, well, how do we actually draw a line? What do we do next? So we sorted it a few different ways. First, we sorted it by the impact score, and thought maybe we could just inform it the equity. What are the most impactful ones, and then what does the equity look like? Is there some way to make it stronger or more equitable? But that really looked like a traditional climate action plan. That wasn't really what we were going for. Resilience wasn't prioritized, and equity wasn't centered. So then we did it the opposite way, and we sorted it by the most impactful equity strategies, but that wasn't going to get us to our goal. It didn't have enough of a greenhouse gas reduction component to it, and mitigation was not prioritized. So then we said, well, let's take the ones that fall in the top for both the impact and both the equity, but that was just too limiting. We didn't have enough strategies that fell at the top of both. So then finally, the last one, we sorted by we added the impact to the equity and then sorted that to look at that percentile. And that really gave us the just right score. And then we looked at the ones that were within the top 75th percentile, a combined score, and that's where we landed. So while we were doing this work, we kept thinking about this graphic on the right that you've been seeing all along, the equity-centered approach with the climate action and resilience. And we were trying to look at which methodology truly reflected that. So this was the breakdown of across all the pathways and all the objectives, the top 75th percentile strategy by objective. Now you'll see, unfortunately, waste is not the most impactful, but we know that. Buildings and energy is really where the bulk of the greenhouse gas emissions are coming from, and then transportation. Community is mostly engagement. There are plenty of good strategies in there that working group is going to consider. Environment has a nice number. They went through the exercise on Monday. In waste, we need to take a deeper dive into our strategies and really think about, well, I know we're all in this pathway because we know how important waste management is. It might not be the most impactful in greenhouse gas reductions, but every single human being impacts our waste stream, and we need to all, and that's kind of like, it's like the gateway to all of this, I think. Litter and what we do with our waste is just essential to the big picture. So we're going to go deeper into that. Don't get worried that we only ended up with 4. We're gonna build that back out next. But I wanted you to just see what it looks like in the bigger context. So, for example, the top 3 waste strategies were site plan review and community advocacy and commercial recycling. The ones that didn't quite make it with very high scoring were model zero waste internally, community partnerships, and institutional best practices. Well, that doesn't mean that we need to cut them out. It just means maybe these 3 strategies would be rolled up. Some component of them would just roll up into something that makes more sense. We don't want to spread ourselves too thin. So I'm going to hand it over to Wendy to explain this activity. You should have all gotten, so on that email that I sent this morning, there is a link to the activity, and also on the first slide of this slide deck, if you have access to that, is a link to the activity.
And David has also just put it in the chat for a 3rd location. So hopefully your bases are covered. And I will say, if you're only on a phone right now, I think you'll find the activity challenging. So if you do have access to a laptop screen or computer screen, I think it'll make it a little bit easier. But so what we're going to do is we're going to be put into 3 different breakout groups. Dawn will have one, I'll have one, and David will have one. And our groups will stay together for an hour. But what we're going to do is go through the 4 objectives that we had under waste, and go through them one at a time and look at the results from the strategization that Dawn just talked about that was done on them, and just kind of discuss them. We'll do similar to what we've done in previous exercises. We'll have some stars and some X's on our Google Excel spreadsheet document that we can use to move to things that we still like, or can X things that we don't. We can, as other groups might have looked at them before we get to our little 15 minutes on that one, you might like something that somebody else wrote in the comments or notes, so you can also star or X those. And then we want to be looking at, so do the strategies that made the cut, do those seem appropriate? Keeping in mind our first goal is to reduce carbon emissions 45% by 2030. So we're kind of looking at a 10-year time frame with this first set of strategies. And then, are we comfortable with the number of strategies that need to be prioritized? Is it a manageable set? Can we fully commit to ensuring the success of those? And does it make sense, again, within that 10-year timeline period up to 2030? So those are the things we'll be doing. And I know Dawn's working on breakout groups. So we'll take a break. Do you want to do till 9:45, Dawn? Okay, so we'll take a break till 9:45. You can go refresh your coffee or water, whatever you need to do. And then when we come back, we'll be sent into our breakout groups. And like I said, you'll just stay in the same group, and we'll go through each of the objectives and spend 15 minutes on each one before we come back to the big group to wrap things up today.
Yeah, so go ahead and take a break. When you come back, I'm going to send you into your rooms, and your facilitator will give you further instruction and make sure each person is oriented to the activity. If you do finish up early, you can come back to the main room, and we can we can just kind of wrap up and talk about it together. But just be careful on Teams because there are two buttons at the top. One is to leave the whole meeting and one is to return to the main room. So just keep an eye on that. And if you do get kicked out, just come back to the meeting and we'll figure it out together. So go ahead and take your break, and I'll be setting up these rooms. So if anyone has any questions, just ask. All right, I know we still have a couple minutes, but for those of you who are listening, the link to the activity is in the chat, and then I'll have breakout room 1. So if you don't go anywhere, it's because you're staying with me. Wendy's going to have breakout room 2, and she's going to start with objective 2 on the tabs at the bottom of your sheet. And then David is going to be facilitating breakout room 3 and starting with objective 3. And then they will rotate every 15 minutes to, and you'll stay with your same group the whole time. If you wrap up early, like I said, you can come back to the main room and we can have a conversation together. But I'm going to go ahead and send you into your rooms just because it takes a while for some reason for teams to like get everyone where they're supposed to be. So I'm going to send you there. I know everyone's not back from their break, but they'll be where they need to be. And then just ask your facilitator for more instructions if you need them. So I'm going to set them up now. I may have not put the return to meeting option on there, Wendy. Okay, so I think you are all where you're supposed to be. So if you, do each of you have the activity open? Can you see my screen? Okay. So if you have it open on your own, you'll be able to type into it. But we're going to start with objective 1. So let me see who I have in here. I have Katrina, Alexis, Kelsey, Heather, Jason, Tyla. It's nice to see you. Tyla Madison, I should have said this earlier. I just now see that you've joined us. She's from Sierra Club. And so she's going to hopefully be able to join us and help us make these this plan even more impactful and strong. We have Maeve joining us in turn, and I'm not sure who's on 804-275-6476.
That's Tyler.
That's Tyler. Okay, great. Well, I'm glad that your phone stayed with your login because sometimes you end up in different breakouts. It's nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
So on this first one, just to remind you, the objective is model zero waste through municipal operations. And none of the strategies made the top 75th percentile. So we need to figure out, of all these strategies, which ones are really important? Which ones do we have to include in the plan? And are there any that we can combine? So what I would ask you to do, I'm going to give you a few minutes to just read through all of these and think about that. Some of the guiding questions at the top, do the strategies that made the cut seem appropriate? Well, none of them did on this objective. So which ones do we need to reconsider? To help guide you on that, these numbers to the right, I would look at the impact percentile and the equity percentile. So for example, this composting one has a pretty good impact on greenhouse gas and resilience and feasibility and cost effectiveness and jobs. It just doesn't have a very high equity score. So that doesn't mean that we can't add some components that would make it more equitable. Maybe since this is 74%, which is pretty close to where that bar, that 75th percentile bar that we're trying to come up with, maybe that's one we would want to add back in. So you can make any notes, just click on the square and type into the notes squares. Down at the bottom are stars and X's. So if there are some in here that you're comfortable carving off, for now, go ahead and click on an X and then click on it again and hold it, and you can drag it up over to the working group reaction cell next to the strategies. And that's going to help us decide, which ones need to be further developed in the plan versus which ones can kind of be on a checklist to monitor and capture later. So are there any questions on this activity so far?
Is your screen, should it be on the spreadsheet? Because right now I see link to activity still.
Huh. Thank you for telling me that. I'm sitting here talking about something that I'm looking at and you're not. I probably need to stop sharing and then reshare. So what I was saying is, for those of you who don't have it up on your own screen, now you'll see objective 2. I'll just show you. See how this one's in green? That means it did make the cut above 75th percentile. But in objective 1, none of them did. The closest combined percentile is 56%. So what I was encouraging you to do is look at the impact and equity scores separately, because now you can see that actually composting does have a pretty good impact score. And maybe we just need to think about how to make that more equitable. But these are all strategies relating to modeling zero waste through municipal operations. This isn't really community composting. This is thinking about City of Richmond buildings, community centers, how we're leading by example. So that's why it's not quite as impactful, but it is important to lead by example. So be thinking about that as you look through these strategies. Over here on the right, you can click on a cell and type in the notes. On the left are the working group reactions. So if you really like one, click on the star once to get the blue box, then click on it again, and you can drag it up. Did anything not make it that you think is especially important to achieving that goal? Are we comfortable with the number of strategies? Of course, we put them all in here because we like all of them, but we really need to think about what we can accomplish and what we, as a team, all of us, with all of our stakeholders, all of the organizations we represent, can we really manage? Which ones can we really manage? And then in terms of the 2030 timeline, think about that too. We want to be successful by 2030 on whatever it is that we take into the next stage of development. So I'm here to answer questions and facilitate in any way that I can be helpful, but otherwise the stage is yours. And we have about 10 minutes in this group, 8 to 10 minutes on this objective. And feel free to drag stars up to other people's comments too. If you see, as we start going into the other groups too, you'll see more comments from other breakouts. If you liked it, anything you're reading, just add a star to it.
Can I be blunt here, you guys?
Go for it.
I think that we're getting low equity scores here because the city is talking about what it's going to do and what it's going to build. But I'm wondering if the real issue isn't reparations. Because the city can do things all day long. But if people, if they're in a position, if they're not in a position to, give a hoot, then it's not going to matter.
So explain to me what you mean about these strategies getting low equity scores.
So I'm guessing because I wasn't here. I didn't make all of what you explained earlier. I didn't make that process. But I feel like these all are great things, but how on earth could it be equitable if so all city residents will have access now to all of these things that the city plans on doing, all of these wonderful new processes. And so people who have a more comfortable time in day-to-day life can happily and easily engage them. But
like which one's an example? Which strategy
okay
made you start thinking about that?
Okay, so let's see.
How about model zero waste internally? That one has a 0% on the equity.
Okay, so over there. So the city's doing it, right? But the city is spending money on doing that to promote effective waste and recovery. if if someone doesn't care because they're worried about other things, then someone will simply just disregard their trash that they throw out on the ground rather than someone. How do I get my thoughts?
Actually, you're talking about model zero waste externally, and that one has a pretty good equity score. And so maybe I just need to show you a little deeper dive on the equity scoring. I was talking about this model zero waste internally, further down, track and visibly promote large-scale climate neutrality efforts and implement strategies that incentivize behavior change among city employees, such as elimination of desk-side trash bins, removal of single-use plastics and styrofoam, and regular waste minimization and sustainability trainings. So let me jump over to this. Can you see the matrix?
I'm like switching between looking at you and your screen and looking at my my activity here. So where am I looking at? I'm looking at your screen now.
Yeah, do you see the real colorful spreadsheet?
Yeah, I see that.
Okay, so if I search for model zero waste. Where did it go? Okay, so this was the one, and you can see over here, it has all ones on these equity. The yellow and the blues, these are all the equity scores. Now, it looks like it does have a, see, it does have a 5. Oh, internally. I'm sorry. We're looking at internally. Let's just say that one does have equity. Okay, so internally it all has ones. And that's why it got a 0%, because it's low on racial equity and environmental justice. It's low on health and well-being. It's low on government accountability. Although
That
I would
doesn't make sense.
I would think it would be higher on government accountability because we're trying to model internally. So this was, this scoring is not a science. This was done by the folks on the roundtable side. And so it's, we can say, well, actually there is an opportunity for this to show government accountability and to help build community wealth. If we can get it done right in-house, then we can go out and do better in the community and really target specific neighborhoods and start thinking about the ideas that you're generating. So it doesn't mean that it's not going to be equitable. It means that at this point it doesn't appear to be, but we could build it out better.
The process has a couple sheets in the wind. I see.
Yeah, the greenhouse gas, that has scientific numbers behind it, those greenhouse gas scorings. But the rest of them, there are a lot of subjective, well, this one doesn't sound like it's equitable right now, but it doesn't mean we can't add some components later on that would make it more equitable. So we just need to decide right now, this is just a guideline, this scoring, just to give us a starting place, because we do need to whittle some of these down. We can't manage this many.
So if the city's doing something and it's for everyone's benefit, that's equal on the surface level, right? But then again, it's not necessarily it's the city. It's just the city doing something.
On this one, this objective. Yeah. Objective 1 is just model zero waste through municipal operations.
Right. That's what we're talking about here. So,
right.
So how on earth does the city make these things more equitable, or could they be more equitable?
I think that has more to do with the other objectives. I think on this one, which ones, maybe we should be asking ourselves, which of these are most important for the city to do in order to lead by example? Because so often in the community, they'll say, well, the city doesn't even recycle. Why should we be recycling? Or,
I see the line of thought. Okay.
Have you seen how much trash is generated on construction sites when the city builds a new building? But they're going to start making contractors out in the private sector divide up all of their construction debris. That's when it gets sticky. We do have to make sure that we're modeling the behaviors that we expect the community to do. But those are great points.
So just from my standpoint, I think the first two, we should find a way to kind of prioritize or, rework those so that they can move a little bit higher on the priority. I think they're achievable and have a good impact. And, those are the two. I can't get my little stars to get up there. I wanted to put like 5 or 6 beside those. But
okay,
I just feel like the first two, the composting and the zero waste. And I did put in a note under the zero waste that is really broad in wording, and it could go up in priority if we made it a little bit more specific, if we did And here is where we can pull some of the other pull some of these others in. For example, we're saying high impact zero waste practices. So like the composting gets under that, the internal zero waste kind of can go under that umbrella. So I think that one is an example where we could slide in some other ones. Education and awareness can, there's an awareness and education aspect that can fall under that. So I think this is definitely one that you talked about earlier where we could pull some of the other ones under the umbrella, especially under the zero waste one, under the number 2, because it does have a strong impact. It does have a good equity percentile, and it's broad enough where we could say by education and awareness and partnering with the community and, demonstrating best practices, etc. You see where I'm going with this, Dawn? I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling, but.
No, excellent, excellent. I think these are great points. Jeannie, I see that you just joined. I'm going to send you over to Wendy's group. And what we're doing is talking through, or actually, since you're here, why don't you just stay here? Are you there? I see your name.
I am here.
Yeah, let me orient you to where we are.
Okay, I love what Katrina just said, by the way, though.
Okay,
especially
great.
Because as I went out into the community to talk to folks about the process that we're doing here, there was a lot of apathy, there was a lot of misunderstanding, and there was a lot of work for us to do when it comes to folks understanding why climate change and why all of these things are important in their daily lives. To kind of piggyback on what Jason said, they didn't care. And filling out that survey was not a high priority on anybody's list on Brooklyn Park Boulevard. When I walked down the street, I thought people would be really interested in it, and to them, it didn't make any difference because it's not part of their day-to-day life of getting food on the table. They don't think that the city ever listens to them anyway. So that my experience just kind of dovetails what Jason and Katrina both just said.
Okay, excellent. All right, so we're going to move on to objective 2, but if you want to look at this, we're going to keep this open until the end of the day tomorrow. So at any point, go back in, drag stars, add comments. If you can see, any of the ones on the bottoms that you're comfortable letting go, if you want to drag an X up next to it, that would be helpful. And if there are any that you definitely want to keep in, add the star. Otherwise, I think there will be opportunity to kind of combine and roll up. But I really like what you were saying, both Katrina and Jeannie. So thank you for that feedback. And Jason, great food for thought. I think as we move into objective 2, we'll be able to speak to that a little more. This one is reduce commercial waste. Did my screen switch? I just want to check. Or do you all have access to objective 2? All right, so this one, reduce commercial waste, and the one strategy that did make the cut is commercial recycling. So mandate an equitable multifamily and commercial recycling program for new and existing properties with equivalent levels of service as trash collection at no additional cost to renters. So that one made the cut. The rest of them did not. They fell short. So take a look. Again, you can see the comments from some of the other breakouts, and we'll go through the same kind of process.
Hey, I'm having trouble getting to objective 2. Is it on the same spreadsheet, or do I need to click another link?
It's on the same spreadsheet down at the bottom. There's a tab that says objective 2.
Oh, there it is. Thank you.
There.
Hey, Dawn, I can't move my stars, but composting is both commercial and, you know, single family or I guess we could say consumer composting are both big deals for me.
Okay. Yeah, the stars are a little tricky. If you click on it once to get the blue square around it and then click on it again, you can drag it. But I'll go ahead and move 2 stars up there for you.
Same for me, Dawn, if you'll put some up for me under recycling and composting, also those top 2.
Okay.
Yeah, of course, recycling as well. Hey, Dawn, I wasn't able to get onto that New York Times conversation about the circular economy, but I'm looking for the, I know that they videotaped it, so when I find it, I'll send it on to you. And if you want to pass it on to everybody, I'm sure it was a fascinating conversation about how circular economy could actually, will or won't actually get us to where we need to be as a planet.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I had it up and then a meeting happened at the same time and I had to close it. So thanks for reminding me. I need to go back and see if I can find that link and share it.
It was kind of the dumb time of the day for them to do that, but you know, nobody asked us, so.
That's right.
Dawn, I think the reason I can't move my stars is because I'm using my phone to do this. But
Okay.
I think community sharing circular economy also has the potential to be equitable. You know, like we can get it there. So
Okay.
that one's important.
Yeah, it looks like others feel the same.
I'm really sorry that the task force for institutional waste scored so low on the equity percentile, because I do think that is could really have a strong impact. Well, the impact percentile is pretty decent, but I really like that one, even though
Yeah, that's a great point. I like that one too. Ryan is the one who brought that up at one point and said that, you know, if you think about institutional waste, whether it's hospitals or universities or government buildings or schools, you know, whatever you think of as an institution, they create so much waste. So to really learn about best practices, I like that one too.
Yeah, I wish it just, the fact that it's just like 0, even if it had something, 10% on the equity percentile, I would feel a little better about liking it. You know, I like that one.
Well, and I think the way to make it equitable is when we figure out which institution, you know, who this task force will be composed of. You know, if we really consider representatives from the right organizations or, you know, neighborhoods that are helping to create that.
I think that's a good point. Put that in the notes part, Dawn, so that we can, you and I are team task force.
Yes.
And I think you know, when the roundtable looks at these and says, "Oh, that scores very low," when it comes to the equitable piece, we also have to remember that, and this is something I can bring up at the roundtable, we also need to make sure that it might not seem like it scores high on equitability, but is that a real word? But when it affects neighborhoods that have historically been dumping grounds, or when it affects neighborhoods that historically have bad air pollution because of, you know, the crap that's being pulled out of buildings and thrown into dumpsters, that is a massive issue for them. And when we clean that up, when we find a different way to deal with that institutional waste, then that automatically makes the air quality better in those neighborhoods. It automatically, we don't have to build another dump. So that's another way to look at it.
Yeah.
That is a great point. I love that.
Is. Yay! Maybe we can push that up then. Again, maybe rewording it so that it could be a strong.
Well, somebody remind me that I said that before the next roundtable meeting.
All right, just another minute on this one, and then we'll move on to objective 3.
I haven't seen any on any of the objectives that we worked on that I want to put an X beside, which I don't know if anybody else feels the same way. Not because, I mean, I'm really giving them serious consideration, and I don't see any that are just like, all right, that can go. I really only see opportunities to, so far, only see opportunities to just kind of roll them into another priority. Like this could be a part of this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I haven't put any X's beside anything. I just feel like they can be incorporated in other places.
Right.
I agree, Katrina. And, you know, like when I look at building codes, people can say, well, I don't, you know, that seems like it's pretty low priority. But then, and Katrina can vouch for this, when the Clean City Commission meets, which has folks from all over the city, including the neighborhoods that we're really sort of concentrating on with this process, the fact that none of the old apartment buildings or none of the old commercial spaces in neighborhoods have any way for folks to recycle or to hide trash, and it ends up all over the street. All over the street, and they don't have a way to recycle. You know, that becomes a huge quality of life and health issue. So for a lot of us who don't hear those conversations, that doesn't sound like an important thing. But then for others of us who talk to folks who are actually living in those spaces, it's a massive thing. So this is kind of a difficult process, I'm finding.
Yeah,
it is. It is.
Just for that reason.
Well, let's go ahead and move over to now. On that point, though, like say the circular economy community sharing. Promote a circular economy by fostering community spaces for sharing resources and sponsoring fairs and workshops for reuse, rental, and repair. Now, who's doing that? Think of it that way. Is that Katrina and Jeannie? Are you going to start setting up fairs, the Clean City Commission? You know, I mean, we have to think about what we're actually capable of doing on top of what we're already doing that's potentially more impactful. So just think about it that way too.
But now that you've said it, Dawn, that's a great idea, Jeannie, for the Clean City Commission.
It is a great idea, but you know, also that's a great idea for community wealth building and other economic development in the city as well. I mean, there used to be a bike company that did exactly that in Highland Park, and that helped people with transportation issues, and it helped people with, you know, being able to get and afford a bike, and it kept things out of the landfill. So, I mean,
I love
think
it.
that we could tie, you know, that's a great way to tie in other city services.
Yeah.
Right. Great point. All right. So objective 3 is reduce residential waste. The one that made the cut is composting measures. So establish an equitable citywide food waste diversion and reduction program that makes composting accessible to all. So that one scored very well. But take a look at the rest that didn't, and we'll go through the same process.
I'm sorry, Dawn. I still can't move those. I can't move the stars. Would you move the illegal dumping? Where did I just see that? Did I dream that I
Yes,
saw
I see
illegal
it.
dumping?
Environmental justice, illegal dumping. You want a star?
Yeah, that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing in Highland Park and North Side.
I wonder if the city can partner with surrounding counties to expand services.
Which services?
Specifically bulk trash pickup. You know, over there in North Side, you know, right on the border there of Henrico. I mean, because I lived in that neighborhood, like right on the edge there. Some from experience, some people on the Richmond side would be okay, say if I came in and cleared out a bunch of poison ivy and like tree debris and, you know, yard debris and stuff like that. Sometimes they have a lot of it and I have to charge the client to haul it away. But people in the city can just pile that stuff out and the city will pick it up. But someone 2 blocks away doesn't have that option and they're forced to pay my dump fee or my haul away fee. If the city could somehow partner with the surrounding counties to be able to provide the same or similar access to bulk pickup, then those people would be less burdened by their bulk waste and it might not end up in a ditch somewhere.
Jason, there's I can't remember if it's objective 1 or objective 2. There's one for municipal. Which one is that, Dawn, for the municipal operations? Number 1. Yeah, so under number 1, there was a community partnership strategy. And I think that can be rolled into our municipal operation zero waste one. That's you know, that we want to make a higher priority because it would kind of serve what you're talking about, partnering with other counties, neighborhoods, agencies, et cetera, to be able to fill in the gaps in some of these areas or in some of these situations where you've got that little bit of an imbalance, you know? So we could move community partnerships. That's one of the ones I think that could be rolled into the zero waste municipal strategy to kind of cover what you're talking about, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, think globally, act locally. create regional and intersectional partnerships across the neighborhoods, agencies. Yeah, great,
Yeah.
great catch.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then on that, shoot, where is it? The page. Yeah, the residential reuse. That also could be rolled into the what we talked about in the last objective, which was, help. Let's get the city, economic development, and other departments interested in a formal reuse program. That could be taken off of a circular economy. Yeah.
So
Do you know
which
I
one?
can't find it. So to the
The
bottom
com-
of the sheet that we're on now, that
Objective
says
3
encourage. Where is it?
or 2?
Informal tool services. Hang on. This is terrible. I gotta start using a computer because I keep getting phone calls and
That's
it's kicking
okay.
me out of it. What is it? For consumers to use tools.
So
I think it's objective 3 that we're looking at. Aren't we on 3 now?
we are on 3.
Yeah, so it's the one at the bottom. Circular economy. We could just move
Residential
circular
reuse.
economy. Right, same thing. Just just fold that into the circular economy and the in objective 2, which we were just talking about. Instead of just throwing people out there and saying use free cycle and next door, if the city and economic development actually helped develop businesses or nonprofits that were located in neighborhoods where folks need that, that would sort of be taken off our plate and given to another department. Does that make sense?
Yeah, great
Am I
point.
making-
Yeah, I like that.
Sorry, I didn't realize I wasn't muted. Did you just hear my cat screaming?
I wasn't sure if it was a baby or a cat.
That's our cat. He sits on the stairs and he pushes his face through the railings and just screams until I feed him.
So he is a baby. All right, another minute on that, and then we'll switch to 4. All right, so feel working on that one if you still have more. Otherwise, I'm going to switch to objective 4 on my screen. So this one is reduce industrial waste. The 2 that made the cut are around environmental justice. So the first one is site plan review, requiring folks to implement measures to identify potential impacts of new industrial facilities on neighboring communities. And then the second one is community advocacy. So advocate for state and regional policies aimed at reducing industrial waste, particularly from facilities in or adjacent to frontline communities and or in floodplains and flood-prone areas. The ones that didn't, waste to energy, waste audits, an industrial waste campaign, organic waste from industrial processes, carbon offsets, and landfill gas capture. And then materials exchange, looking at it at the industrial scale, trying to promote that circular economy at the industrial level. And then zero waste certification. So promoting and rewarding those companies that are earning zero waste certification through programs.
I feel like a lot of things that didn't make the cut could be addressed by community advocacy if we advocate for state and regional policies. You know, those things could be folded into those policies, and then it would be out sort of off our plate as a
Like
city.
which ones?
You know, carbon
I
offsets.
think the certification one can get rolled into that, you know?
And the certification one, exactly.
Yeah.
The tracking, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, quite a
Roll
few
it
of
into
those.
what? Into which one?
community.
They got rolled into the community advocacy so that the state and, you know, regional policies were sort of taking care of those things. And then finding, you know, the state was finding funding for that, then it would be off our plates.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, do you feel like it's already going on elsewhere, so we don't need to be tracking it, managing it, and implementing it on our level?
That I don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
my feeling is if there were actual official policies and laws being made at the state level for that to be tracked, then it's possible that, you know, the state entities could be doing that instead of the cities. Katrina, what do you know about what the state's already doing or is planning to do?
I don't know a lot, sadly. But I think tracking, at least, even if we don't, there are different certifications out there. So yeah, that's something that's probably covered. But tracking may be, you know, audits and findings and tracking may need to be
Right.
stronger and could definitely get rolled into that advocacy.
Yeah, like I feel like if we could, under community advocacy, say advocate for state and regional policies aimed at reducing, you know, that, for example, or including tracking,
Yes,
or
yes.
carbon
Yeah.
offsets,
Yeah.
certification, materials exchange programs, you know, like that. Like we could just
Exactly.
roll those into it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
You specifically called out under community advocacy, tracking, materials exchange, and certification. Or,
Yeah, those are the ones that I looked at, but I don't know, should waste audits be under there as well?
waste audits are messy and they're hard to manage. They're super helpful, but we would almost have to create a program.
Okay.
Mhm. So I would say at least tracking. I mean, I feel very strongly about tracking,
Okay.
rolling the tracking into the community advocacy, even if we leave off certifications.
Okay.
And I can't believe that there isn't some state program already that deals with, waste to energy and technologies converting waste into biofuels. If there isn't, we should be advocating for that, because that just, I mean, why would the governor or why would the state not want another revenue stream as well through, another, corporation, type of corporation moving to the state? Maybe rolling waste to energy into there too.
And there was another one under another objective that I think was related to incentivizing or rewarding. So we could maybe even roll that from another objective into that too. So we're talking about advocating for policies. We're talking about tracking whether or not they're actually keeping up with that, and then maybe incentivizing or rewarding, or instead of a certification program, maybe a more of a reward, like thank you so much for this, in 2022 being the company that reduced their something by 20% or whatever, which isn't necessarily certification, but it is some kind of reward or highlighting, or like getting a participation trophy. A little above getting a participation trophy. I'll just have to find the one that goes into that.
These are great ideas, and the more that you guys can pick up on those ones that can combine or be left off, or parts of them can be saved, the the more grateful I will be for you, because otherwise it's me. All right, just a couple more minutes and then we're going to pull everyone back. It's funny, on objective 1, there are no red X's anywhere.
Yeah.
Same with 2, 1 and 2. So interesting how slow Teams is. It says room 2 is still closing.
Okay, I think we're back. Kim had to
All
leave,
right.
so Kim had to go to something else, but
Okay, great. Well, welcome back, everybody. So let's share what we learned. Wendy, how did your group do?
let's see. What did we learn? We learned that municipal operations are still important, even though none of the strategies made the cut. So kind of similar to what we discussed in our buildings and energy working group, we still need to be able to walk the walk as the city and kind of lead the way and be a trusted organization. I think we also learned that some of the other strategies that we created in some of the other groups can be rolled up or combined. Yeah, just maybe thought about or reworded, just a little more thinking now that we did the first iteration, but maybe in the second iteration, we can definitely improve on some of that. And feel free to jump in, Tom or Elle.
How about
Yeah,
yours, Dave?
just
Okay,
about-
go ahead, Elle.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think you just about got it. The only other thing that I think came up as like a topic of conversation between us was a conversation about biofuel is the only other thing, and following Executive Order 77 and reduction of single-use plastics were things that we also talked about in greater length. But yeah, I think that's.
And I think too, Elle, you had made a good comment though about like the order that things needed to be done in, and like you can't do this until you've done this type of thing also.
Oh yeah, that was just about pay as you throw, basically. We need to kind of model that like EO 77 on a statewide level before we start charging people for the size of their trash, to make sure that it's implemented equitably.
Excellent.
And just in general too, a lot of folks mentioned EO 77. I really think that is a game changer, that if we had that, we were considering that previously, I think some of these scores would have been changed significantly.
Mm-hmm. Great points. Yeah, please add those into your notes and continue to make the comments. That's why you guys are part of this working group, because you've got great ideas, great expertise, and we need you to capture that so we can help prioritize. How about David's group?
Yeah, and Dawn and Sharon, please jump in if I misrepresent anything that we talked about. But something that stood out to us was the importance of education across all these objectives. And so while a lot of the education and awareness pieces were maybe ranked lower, how important it's going to be to think about the education piece when we're rolling out some of these strategies, just because things like composting and even recycling aren't super clear. And so to get as much buy-in into those programs, we're going to really need to focus on education, both internally to the city and externally to community members as some of these programs get ramped up.
Great point. Anyone else from that group want to speak up?
This is Sharon. I'll just say I would echo the comments on the executive order. My office, we have the lead in implementing it. And so, I think it would be, we have cities who are looking at it and other localities as potentially adopting it. And it would be great if Richmond was the first to step up.
Love it. All right, how about from my breakout? We had a lot of great conversation. Who wants to summarize what we found? What are the takeaways? Oh, come on. We did not have a shy bunch. Okay, so on objective 1, even though it didn't have much of a, it didn't score high, obviously we do need to lead by example. We need to model what we're expecting our city to do. So same kinds of conversations. Objective 2, when it came to reducing commercial waste, that's where we really saw, and the rest of you probably did as well, where a lot of these can just be rolled up under each other as actions under the strategies. So we have some work ahead of us to clean these up for next time. And this whole Google Sheet will be accessible for the next 2 days. So please go in there and if you have any ideas on what could be added under what, what we can kind of let go of for now, please help us with that, because there's a lot in here and it is all really important, but we need to figure out how to streamline it so that we, like I said, so that we can set ourselves up for success. On objective 3, I think it was, again, the composting measures was really important. And then other than that, we can start rolling some things up, and maybe across objectives, we could potentially streamline a little bit. And then objective 4, they really like the community advocacy one, and maybe putting some of the other things under that so that it would make a little more sense. So that's where we are. I would love to hear your feedback on this exercise in general. What are your general reflections on where we are in the process? Anything that anyone would like to speak up and say? We're all talked out, I'm sure. All right, well then, in that case, go ahead and fill out this survey. We'd love to get your thoughts on how this went, what we could do differently next time, what we could do better. I know that 2 hours is a long time, but we try to do as much work between these meetings as we possibly can so that we can make the best use of your time and get you caught up on everything that's gone on in between. So our next meeting is going to be Thursday, June 17th at 9 a.m. And that's when we'll go through a strategy mapping exercise. It's going to be really interesting and really helpful to get us to where we need to go next. So any updates, upcoming events, any additional resources you'd like to share with this group, go ahead and put them in the chat or on that slide too. And we'll be sure to follow up with an email so that the folks who weren't here will have access to the resources as well.
I guess I'll say something about general reflections there. What I noticed was that we were talking a lot about education, and that seemed to be very important to everybody because it's like the most important thing. But I feel personally that people don't equate environmental justice with social justice on a grander scale. And I feel like we're in a golden moment where people are advocating for social justice. But therein lies all of the intersections. And I think that if we promote, I used the word earlier, buzzword, if we promote the buzzword of intersectionality in dealing with the public, then people would be more willing to engage the climate problem.
Excellent point. Yeah, that's a huge part of engagement. That's why we have all these equity resources and experts and roundtable and the VCU students. Really, you hit it on the nail on the head, Jason. That's really what we're trying to do, is promote the intersectionality and the co-benefits and speak the language with the lived experience. 100%. Thank you. Anyone else want to share a reflection? All right, well, with that, I'll give you your 10 minutes back. I'll stay on the line if you want to hang back and discuss any of this or ask any questions. Otherwise, we'll see you in June. Have a great Memorial weekend.
Bye, everyone. Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.